Hi friends, it's Tutorial Tuesday, even though it's actually Wednesday, and I am here in my friend's Airbnb for a little bit as I continue to find my way. I'm in a safe spot and eager to share this week's pose, Sukhasana, or easy seat. It's not easy, so let's start there. It is actually challenging for the hips and the spine and the knees potentially to sit cross-legged comfortably. So we use props. I'm using a meditation cushion, and I like these that are filled with whatever they're filled with, buckwheat, sand, I'm not sure, so you can mold it. So I don't just flatten it out and sit on the edge. I literally take it and cross my feet and then get here and make it big so that I create the lumbar curve. We want this curve. We don't want to be seated and the spine round and the heart collapse and the shoulders shrug and the neck overarch. So propping up the hips, watch my spine here when I roll my pelvis forward. The cervical spine here and the lumbar spine are the same curve, lordotic curve. When we create and maintain the lower back's lordotic curve, the neck wants to mimic it. So if we're constantly here, the neck is freaking out and our head is usually forward and there's a whole host of other things going on. So the first key is the pelvic positioning to get into our easy seat. So once we find that neutral pelvic tilt, the spine finds its length with ease, then we can create more space in the chest, getting the arms set down into their sockets. And then the arm elbow hangs directly under the shoulder. So often we are instructed to hold the knees potentially, hands on our knees, and I challenge that. If my hands are on my knees, I'm pulling my torso forward and my shoulders are no longer on top of my hips. So I bring the pelvis into that neutral place, prop up the hips enough so my knees are relaxed, hip flexors are relaxed, knees are heavy, maybe one's touching, or maybe only one is touching. They do not have to touch the ground. What matters is that you let go of gripping and holding your knees up. So regardless of where your knees are, the energy of the hip flexors is soft, core is slightly engaged. Deep in the psoas, that hip stabilizer and flexor might be a little bit engaged. We want to make sure it is not gripping, and it might be gripping all day long without you knowing. So feel a sense of ease, easy seat from the hips there by giving your hips enough lift. You can have 2 blocks, you can have 3 blocks, you can have 6 blankets. This cushion is enough for me to manipulate it to make it big enough, and I like that it molds. I also know I have a misalignment in my hips like many of us do, especially if you vaginally birthed a baby. So the moldable kind helps kind of give balance to my imbalance, if that makes any sense. So we start there. We always build from the ground up. So then we go a little bit up, back, and down. Watch my hands come mid-thigh, closer to the hips to drop the elbow straight under the shoulder. This keeps my upper back engaged. That upper back engagement combats poor postural habits and lengthening those upper back muscles that become weak, and also helps to open the chest muscles that get really tight, which also makes them weak. So just that up, back, and down does a lot, not only for easy seat, Sukhasana, but for good posture and breath capacity. So this very simple, very foundational pose that you will see in 99% of classes, we often start sitting on the ground in easy seat, has a lot to it, is my point there. Also, let's remember that yoga is not about physical poses done on the mat. That is one part of it, but it's a design of living in a way with 8 different limbs, but the goal of the physical practices is to sit in easy seat for long periods of time to get into those later limbs. Those words sometimes just go right out the window. concentration, releasing of the senses, meditation, breath work, connecting to source, connecting to the ground. Source is the ground and atmospheric stuff, right? So easy seat is a huge component to yoga in many of the limbs, and a foundation that doesn't necessarily hold true to the meaning of the Sanskrit description or word, Sukhasana. Sukha means easeful. So easeful pose, use props, do what you can to make it easy. That's all instruction if you can sit cross-legged, and you might not be able to. So here's another variation. If you cannot sit cross-legged because of your knees or your hips, we sit on our shins. So knees are at least at the very most narrow. The middle of the knee is in line with the bones, as is points, anterior, superior, iliac spine of the pelvis. If your ankles can't sit like this is not good for the ankle. You can take a little washcloth and roll it up and support that. But this is very good for ankles over time. You want all 10 toes to face backwards so you're not in or out, right? We want to keep lines of joints neutral. So in line with the hips, they can be wider if that feels better. If you go too wide, it starts to pull inside the knee. If you go too narrow, it starts to pull outside the knee. So thinking of at least somewhat relational to the as-is points. And then there's a clicking down. The pelvis is still that neutral pelvic alignment forward. Still the same in the shoulders, up, back, and down. Hands can come palm down, they can come palm up, they can come together, wherever you want for whatever benefit you're seeking. It's all in relationship to the pelvis, then rooting into the legs, whatever variation you have, and growing tall through the crown. Letting the breath expand, letting you connect to source in the ground beneath you, source in the universe and atmosphere around you, the breath moving between those things through you, and how the body and the mind are, again, intimately connected. And this foundational pose is for some of the other limbs: pranayama, meditation, concentration, sense withdrawal, and a huge part of any yoga practice. So Sukhasana, easeful seat. I hope that makes sense to you, and that you can practice it more and more. And we'll get into a practice later in the week, putting this into a more well-rounded flow with the intent to open to some more of those later limbs of yoga, not just asana or the practice on the mat that we know so well in creating shapes with our bodies in poses. All right, my friends, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week.